Hello, good morning, and welcome. It is Friday, the 16th of June, 2023. Welcome to Morning Brew on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes, and thank you for all the wonderful messages that have already come up before we even got started. We've got Master Templar there, we've got Johnny Copperhead, we've got Richard Martin, we've got Lee Grote, we've got Scott R, we've got JJ is in there somewhere, we've got Adam, we've also got Stephanie Wilson and Shazek32. It's been a bit of an epic week, hasn't it? And a bunch of big wins for the forces of good for a change. It's a bit weird. The last sort of 8 years of our lives have just been dominated by these absolute liars, charlatans, cheats, cowards, and there's a sense that they're finally getting what's coming to them, but there's also that a sort of horrible feeling that we've been here before, and is this really the end of Boris Johnson's political career? From now on, is it just going to be stupid Americans paying $4,000 for a ticket to go and see him speak in an incoherent and bumbling way, which they find so charming, which is an act, by the way, that Boris Johnson puts on. He's a completely different person in private to the persona that he portrays in the media and in the public eye. But Trump and Johnson, two of the biggest causes of stress and anxiety amongst people who aren't crazy, because let's face it, the only people still supporting these two men are the crazies. They're like people who you would not leave in charge of your puppy for the weekend. I'm not just talking about Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, because obviously you wouldn't leave them in charge of your puppy for the weekend. But the people who still support them, would you? No, I don't think you would. But like I say, I feel like I have to hold back on the glee a little bit, because anything can happen. Boris Johnson got the Brexit referendum won by cheating and lying and promising it was going to be wonderful. We were going to get £350 million for the NHS. They put it on the side of a bus. People thought, oh, great, we love the NHS. We'll vote for this thing that will destroy the NHS. And Trump got elected in the States. He got elected for president. This guy with no experience in politics. He was reality TV show loon, a trust fund baby who would have made more money had he just put his inheritance from his father into a high rate savings account. He's a terrible, terrible businessman. He's really bad at business. And it's very easy to make money and build towers if you are born into money. It's quite difficult to start from nothing and build your way up. And it's getting harder because the rich and the powerful, like Trump, like Johnson, are kicking the ladder away, because they never climbed the ladder. They were there at the top. They're just setting fire to any entrances for anyone else to get up anywhere near them. And a lot of the policies that they've brought forward. I was talking about Trump's achievements yesterday on the Labour Social with Ollie, Bowler Hat Man, and we were talking about the fact that he didn't achieve anything. Like, he didn't build this wall. He said he was going to build a wall. He said he was going to repeal Obamacare. But what he did do, massive tax cuts to the rich. Massive tax cuts for his buddies, the people who funded him to become president. The rich they have it so hard, don't they? And this is the world that we're in at the moment. And we are obsessing, and I'm afraid, we obviously talk about it a lot on this channel because it's what just sucks up all the oxygen in what's going on. But we talk a lot about Johnson. We talk a lot about Trump. We talk a lot about the war in Ukraine. We talk a lot about Brexit. But what we really should be talking about non-stop until somebody fucking does something about it is the fact that we are now in the warmest June on record in the world, in the history of the world. The warmest June. It is 1.5 degrees on average everywhere around the world, hotter than it was before the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This month, we're there. You know that 1.5 degree of warming that we said that we didn't want to get to? We're there. We're there. And we're doing nothing about it. And we've got people in charge who have banned onshore wind farms. They're banned. You've got Liz Truss, who was elected as Prime Minister, and she said the saddest thing, the most horrifying thing. What was it? It was like the worst thing in the world. You know, it's not like cancer or Hitler. No, nothing like that, mate. It's actually a field of solar panels. I think she said it was the most depressing sight in the world. I was like, oh my God, what is wrong with these people? And here we are, we're still arguing about personalities and wasting our time with these crazed delusions of grandeur. One of my videos I put up last week about Nigel Farage saying years ago, saying that he wanted Britain to be alone in the world. Someone actually responded, what's wrong with Britain being alone in the world? And it's one of those things where you sort of look at the comments and you're like, should I? Because I mean, if you're that thick, even if I spend half an hour, even 5 minutes, even 30 seconds responding, it's a waste of my time. Why is it bad being alone in the world? Well, because we can't feed ourselves for a start. How about that? How about we can't make enough food on this island to feed all the people who live on this island? It's quite a small island for 67 million people. How about we don't have enough oil? We don't have enough coal or gas to sustain our energy needs? How about that, eh? How about the fact that we need stuff that exists in other countries here? We don't make any phones. So this guy's like, what's wrong with being alone in the world? We don't have phones, mate. No one will have a phone because we don't make them. We don't have the rare earth metals that we need to go because they only exist in Africa. What the hell? Like how? What? When? But I guess there's a lot of people who just think being alone in the world's great. And so alienating every other country in the world by having, I don't know, Boris Johnson as our foreign secretary or having Brexit happen and just really, really isolating ourselves is a good thing to these people because they live in cloud cuckoo land. Care in the community. Anyway, the great British video gamer says, I stand that I don't trust them with oxygen. That's true. Partygate, I wouldn't leave Bojo in charge of a can of beans for the weekend. Indeed. Matt Charman, I often think of Boris Johnson as the character, Alexander Johnson as a real creature, both disgusting, of course, indeed. And a column in a paper like the Telegraph. So between talks and writing a column, he'd be making millions every year. Yeah. Don't forget, this is a guy, Boris Johnson referred to £250,000 a year as chicken feed. I would kill for £250 right now. £2.50. If anyone wants to drop a £2.50 into the chat and name someone, I'll go and kill them for you because I need the money. That's a joke, by the way. Obviously, I'm not an assassin for hire. Well, if I was, I wouldn't do it for £2.50. Right. Trump is the only person I know who managed to bankrupt his own casino. I did not think that was possible. I know, Stephanie. That's how bad he is as a businessman. He bankrupted his own casino. Yeah, and both Boris Johnson and Trump, I mean, maybe this is what we should be talking about this morning, is they are very much two cheeks of the same arse. They're very, very similar in their upbringing and their narcissism. They both had fathers who were, I mean, Trump's father was a criminal. He was a slum landlord owner, a slum lord. Apparently he was a nasty, nasty piece of work. And then you look at Stanley Johnson, who once hit, well, not once, but on more than one occasion, you know, presumably, allegedly, hit Boris Johnson's mum so hard on one occasion that we know of, that she ended up in hospital. You know, I don't know how many of you have been out on a night out and someone's started a fight or something. Like, seriously, how much damage you have to do to someone to send them to hospital? How much fury must be there to send someone to hospital? You know, I've seen bouncers deal with people who are drunk and problematic and causing a scene and getting aggressive. And, you know, very rarely have I seen a case where the ambulance has had to turn up. And that's Boris Johnson's dad. And he's a public figure. Boris Johnson wanted to give him a bloody gong. I think he wanted to give him a knighthood. The services to what? To what? The emergency department of the local bloody hospital. Stephanie's dropped £2.50 in the super chat and said Boris. Well, listen, he's referring it to as himself. He's referring to it as a political assassination. So yeah, I like to think in our small way, by us stomping our feet and screaming and shouting about all this stuff going down and supporting people like Pippa Carrera, whose journalism launched this whole thing. That was her investigation into Partygate, into these parties that Boris Johnson was having. And it turned out last night, just before we went online, that I think it's from the WhatsApp messages that have been handed over, they found evidence of like loads more parties. There was 18 more parties, more than the ones that we already knew about. I mean, for heaven's sake. Andrew AB, murder a can of Red Stripe this weekend. Thank you very much. Sefton Park, yeah. Africa, oh yay, tomorrow. What do you reckon, AB? Let's do it. I still need one Pokemon, so let's meet up. But Mark says, even I kill everyone for a pint Steve would be over a fiver nowadays. Exactly, Mark. Inflation. Where's the riot, says Nico De Schmidt. I don't know, mate. I don't know. I think people are too scared. I think people have just been kind of like terrorized into their own homes, so they just don't leave. They can't go anywhere. There's two generations now, the millennials and Generation Z, who have just been so screwed over by people like Boris Johnson, people like Donald Trump. So let's move on slightly, not away from Boris Johnson, but just talk about the Tories for a moment. Because it was quite interesting last night. We looked at the newspapers for today, and most of the newspapers was like, Boris Johnson, Prime Minister, found to be a liar by Parliament, found to be in contempt of Parliament, have contempt for Parliament as well. That's a huge news story. That is, into politics, that's massive. That is absolutely massive. It's almost as massive as a former president of the United States being indicted for federal crimes. You don't want to live in a country in which that kind of thing happens. You really don't. I've accused Boris Johnson and Donald Trump in the past of dragging their countries into some kind of like banana republic, or in our case, a banana kingdom. And they have. And their supporters don't see this. They don't see the damage because they can't see outside. They're in a bubble. They're in a cult. So they can't see outside the bubble. They can't see the damage that these people are doing. But it was interesting to see the newspapers because three of them in particular, the Tory Graph, the Express, and the Mail, the most notoriously, the Express headline today, if you check it out, it is literally like, Boris Johnson, it's a witch hunt. It was a vindictive bunch of MPs who are picking on him. No, they weren't picking on him. Sorry, was the jury who found Harold Shipman guilty? Were they? If he went to a jury trial, I don't know if he did, but if he did, were they just vindictive? Were they just vindictive? No, he was found guilty of doing a crime. Was the judge vindictive? No, the jury said this person did this thing, and the judge goes, okay, well, there's my sentencing guidelines, so this is what I'm going to give as the punishments. And he went after Harriet Harman, and the newspapers have gone after Harriet Harman because she was the chair of the committee. She didn't get a vote. But they talk about it anyway. And it's interesting to see there were other papers that were just like, Boris Johnson's a liar. So you had the Boris Johnson's a liar papers, and they had the Boris Johnson, it's a witch hunt, it's so vindictive. The same thing's happening in the Tory party. But what I think is interesting is Rishi Sunak has not said anything to as far as I know. I will update the Guardian website. Nope, he's still not said anything about this at all. This is staggering. And is he going to hide under a table on Monday? What's going to happen? So on Monday they have the vote on the report, to accept the report. Now Rishi Sunak wants to change the wording of it. So instead of saying they accepted the findings, he wanted to say something like they noted the findings. They noticed these findings. Whether we accept them or not is another matter entirely. I don't think he's going to get away with that. But having said that, one of the things that gave me a little bit of cheer yesterday Well, I'd love the Tory party to rip themselves apart and never govern again. That would be great. So there's a part of me that thinks, goody, let's rip the Tory party apart. But there is also the part of me that knows that Boris Johnson is a dangerous, dangerous person. And we need him out of politics. And what's more important right now, because the Tories are heading towards electoral oblivion anyway, let's face it. What's more important now is making sure that Trump and Johnson are out of politics. Just get them out of there. Just get them as far away from politics as possible, because they are incredibly dangerous, charismatic cult leaders, and their followers are absolutely psychopaths. I mean, you got to be careful here, because I don't want to use disparaging terms about them being mad or insane, because obviously mental health is a real thing and people suffer, and we don't want to sort of diminish what they've gone through. What I'm trying to say is the people who still, to this day, are defending Boris Johnson, they need help. They do. They just need help. People defending Trump. You see any Trump voter being interviewed on any channel, whether it's a sympathetic Trump channel like Fox News or OAN or the One Nation Network or whatever they call it, or whether it's in the UK, people being interviewed about Johnson. But in the US, whenever you see someone being interviewed about Trump, they're always like, they're swivel-eyed loonies. I'm not going to be able to not use discriminatory language here when talking about people who obviously have some kind of big problems. And I've often talked before about environmental issues, factors, sorry, not issues, well, issues as well, but environmental factors of why that particular generation, more so than any other, the generation that grew up with toxins in everything, with everybody smoking, with nuclear testing going on, lead in everything, like just babies' toys had lead in them. I think there is a mental health crisis amongst the boomer generation. And obviously, this doesn't affect all boomers. Hashtag not all boomers. But it's there. It really is. And you see these people being interviewed on Fox News, and none of them are sane. Like, none of them are playing on a level playing field. They're a picnic. They're a sandwich short of a picnic. Let me put it that way. Maggie Pie says 20 Swedish krona. Super chat. Thank you very much, Maggie Pie. Tory civil war with swords, as in the olden days. That would be fantastic. I'll pay to watch that. Christopher Bowles. Sunak's government has barely put forward any Commons business for 3 weeks. Most of the programme next week is Lord's considerations. They've run out of ideas. Indeed. And also worth noting that the by-election... Sorry, pardon me. The by-elections that we've got coming up in Ainsley or whatever it's called, that constituency in Yorkshire, I think it is, and the election coming up in Uxbridge and Ruislip, which is Boris Johnson's old constituency, are taking place on the last day or the day before the last day of this term of Parliament. So Rishi Sunak will not have to face Prime Minister's questions after the by-elections, which he's set. I mean, they're pretty much set to lose them to Labour on those two. Mid-Bedfordshire, bit more difficult. Don't forget, Nadine Dorries had a 24,000 majority. Also, Nadine Dorries hasn't resigned yet. So when that by-election is going to take place, nobody knows. But it's going to be difficult for Rishi Sunak to navigate through this. And I think that he's just been given the advice to hide. I think that's just what people are told. They just said, listen, mate, just find a table, hide under the table, and not do anything. But to go back to the vote on Monday, although it has been nice to see that there's not that many Boris Johnson lunatics out there, MPs who are in part of the Boris Johnson fan club, still probably about 5. It's not that many, about 5. The vote's going to be very interesting on Monday. It's a one-line whip, which means Tory MPs don't have to turn up. It's a free vote. They don't have to vote with the party or against the party. There's no whip on that. So is Rishi Sunak going to vote? Is he going to vote to accept the findings of a parliamentary committee that was set up by Parliament to investigate a parliamentarian who they thought had broken the rules in the most egregious way? He had lied to Parliament, misled Parliament, And if anyone in the next few days that you get chatting to says, "Oh, I don't know what all this fuss is about a bit of cake," can we just address this? It's not about the cake. In the same way that in America with Trump, it's not about classified documents, okay? They're just a factor in the crime, yeah? The real crime, in our case, was the fact that the guy lied to Parliament. He lied to Parliament. And then he was found in contempt of the committee that was set up to investigate him lying to Parliament. In Trump's case, it wasn't that. He just had classified documents. Other elected representatives have had classified documents and taken them home accidentally or whatever, but they've handed them over when asked, and that's why no charges are brought against them. That wasn't the crime. The crime, and what Boris Johnson is, what Donald Trump, it's easy to get them mixed up, has been indicted for, was when the government's archive committee or whatever they're called turned up and said, "Can we have these documents?" He said, "What documents?" and hid them behind his back. That was the crime. Or hid them in the toilet, actually. Anyway, but that's a classic case of the way that these slimy sleazebags in the media and from Tufton Street and MPs and people from Congress in America try and worm out of this thing. Oh, what's all this fuss about some documents? Other people have documents. What about him? What about that? Why am I being done for speeding when that car's obviously going faster than I was? A crime is a crime. Whataboutism gets you nowhere. You can't stand up accused of murder in a court of law and say, "Well, there's been murders all through history. What about that other murder that happened the other week, eh? Yeah, why are you prosecuting him for that murder that was done?" Yeah. I once had a conversation with someone about, talking about the crimes of the British Empire, from which we are still benefiting, and from which descendants who we still have records for, because a lot of records were destroyed, who can prove that their life chances were diminished, notably by our empire or by slavery. And they were like, "Yeah, but what about the Roman Empire, eh? They had slaves." And I'm just like, whataboutism is the lowest form of debate. It is absolutely the most infuriating thing. It was developed in the 1950s in Soviet Russia, in the Soviet Union, as a way of deflecting the problems that were going on in the Soviet Union at the time. They had the space race, they had the nuclear program. People were struggling to feed their families and just eating really basic stuff every day. And they had a tyrannical government that would send people off to gulags in Siberia if he said the wrong thing or looked at someone the wrong way. It was a tyrannical time to live. But at the time, they were saying, "Hey, but what about what's happening in America, eh? With the civil rights movement and women having rights and gay people existing." I mean, and the same thing happens today. So if anyone says, "What about this? What about Hillary Clinton? What about the parties that Bernard Jenkins might have had?" Doesn't matter. Like, fine. Go after them. Get a committee together. Find some evidence. Fine. If you've got some evidence to present, that's wonderful. But it doesn't diminish the crimes of others. Just because one serial killer killed 10 people doesn't mean the one who killed 9 is like a good guy somehow. No, it doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. Anyway, Bob A says Trump had the secret recipe for Coca-Cola and Kentucky Fried Chicken. Sunak will call a general election in January 25. Oh, Gary, I really hope not. First of all, I really don't want to see 18 more months of the Tory party and what trouble they can cause in those 18 months. And secondly, I don't want an election in winter. It's really that. After the last one, please, no election in winter. No, they should be banned. Like we have the King's birthday, which isn't actually the King's birthday. I think it's this weekend, isn't it? The King's birthday, right? Which is the official birthday of the King. It doesn't matter when the monarch's birthday actually is. They have an official birthday. Why? Well, because there was a king or queen back in the day whose birthday was in the middle of winter. And who wants to take a day off work in winter? What are you going to do with it? Just huddle in the house with a duvet around you? No. Forget it. Put it in the summer. Put the birthday in the summer, because that's when we want to be out and doing stuff. So if you're going to have an election, have it in the bloody summer. We have some really weird quirks of our political system, and having elections in the middle of winter sometimes is probably one of the maddest. I mean, they do it in America. They have the presidential election in November. You accuse of people queuing up in the snow, pretty much, up in the northern states. What? Why? It makes no sense. It will make more sense to have elections June, July, August, but maybe September. We often have them in this country in May. For that reason, for the fact that it's nice, if you're going around knocking on people's doors, you don't want to have your door open for half an hour, letting all the cold air in, frigid air, the frost, the sleet, the snow, while someone witters on about the wonderful policies that the party has. And so, yeah, I don't want that at all. I want the Tories to have an election sooner rather than later. I want rid of them. But we're going to have to see what Sunak does over the next few months, how much distance he puts in between himself and the toxicity that is Boris Johnson. It was made very clear today that the Mail and the Express and the Tory Graph are all still very much on Boris Johnson's side on all this and are against what they're now calling the Westminster blob, aren't they? Because it used to be the civil service blob or the... And that's another thing, isn't it? Like, I know what you are, but what am I? They all do. It's just a really childish thing. So Boris Johnson is obviously a blob. He looks like a blob. He is a blob. He's a blob of a man. He's a smelly, horrible bin bag filled with custard. He is a lying, abusing, cheating, scoundrel scumbag who shouldn't be allowed anywhere near public office. I mean, I don't think he should be allowed out of his house. I think he should be put under house arrest for the rest of his life. Thank you very much. At no expense to the taxpayer. That should be just paid by, I don't know, Vladimir Putin or something. We'll build a wall and get Vladimir Putin to pay for it and put Boris Johnson inside the wall so he can't get out. There's an election promise for you that I'd love to see. But yeah, I don't want him anywhere near politics. But it does look like this thing might run and run. We're going to talk a little bit later because today we're doing the agenda at 1 o'clock. So it's normally at 1 o'clock. We did it at 11 o'clock last week because of timings. But we're doing it at 1 o'clock today. Me and Phil Morehouse. We're going to wrap up the week's events. Ready to go and have fun at the weekend. I hope for all you people out there. And yeah, we're going to be talking about next steps for not just the Conservative Party, but also for the Labour Party, which is like Phil's sort of secret weapon. He knows a lot about Labour policy and why they do the things they do, which doesn't often make sense to us, I have to say. And one of the things I was chatting to Supertansky about yesterday, because we were going to do the agenda with Supertansky, but she couldn't do it at the last minute, unfortunately. But we were talking about how bad Labour's comms are, which is something that, with no minutes left of the show, because it's 10 o'clock now, I can't really get into massively. But there was the fatal motion thing that happened this week with Jenny Jones of the Green Party putting a fatal motion. And it was really bad optics for Labour Party, but they could have turned it around. They could have turned it around by actually explaining why they did what they did in a way that wasn't pithy, in a way that wasn't like, oh, well... which is what we got from Wes Streeting, who put out a tweet saying, well, it's not to the Lords to override the will of the Commons because they're not elected, which is fair enough. But you need to go into that a little bit more detail, please. And then he says, if you want Labour policies, you need to vote for Labour. Well, that's really helpful. Quick, to the time machine. It's like blaming me for something that actually was Labour's fault. They had a leader who was incredibly unpopular. I mean, and agreed to an election in the middle of winter. But why should it fall to people like Phil Morehouse and John West on Twitter to explain why Labour did what they did? Labour should be doing that. But I don't think they've got their comms team together in the right way. They don't seem to understand that they need almost like different parts of the communication strategy for different audiences. Because outside of our bubble, outside of our, we're actually interested in politics. That's why you're watching this. That's why I'm doing these shows. Outside of our bubble, people don't know and they don't care and they don't understand about anything about this fatal motion thing. What's all that about? They just don't know and they don't care. So that kind of like, well, vote for Labour next time. That might work with them. But then you've got thousands of people who are really into politics, who are really useful to you if you are a political party, because they will fight for you. They'll get off their arses, they'll march on the streets, they'll deliver your pamphlets, they'll knock on doors, they'll be activists. They are worth loads more than any individual voter because they'll actually go out and get more voters for you. Keep them on side. So have a communication strategy. And it doesn't take much. All it will take is a tweet, one of those long string tweets, saying, this is what we did, this is why we did it, and this is what we hope to do in the future. They didn't do that. They left it for other people like us to fill in the blanks. And that's not good communications. And so one of the reasons why we set up this channel was because we felt Labour wasn't doing enough with social media. I mean, it's not just social media, really, is it? It's the whole communication of Labour and the rest of the country. It definitely could do with a little bit of improvement. I hope you agree. Anyway, that's why we set up this channel. I don't know how long it'll last without some major funding coming in at some point. George, if you're watching, I'm talking Lucas, not Soros. Obviously, I wouldn't take money from a wealthy billionaire because that would be bad. Oh my God, George Lucas is a wealthy billionaire as well, isn't it? Oh, well, never mind. Why would LP pay if Phil and yourself do it for nothing? That's from Irene. Well, they could get Phil to do it. They wouldn't have to pay him. That's a mad thing. They should pay him, but he will support Labour. He will explain things so people go, oh yeah, okay, I get it now. It blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind. It will cost them next to nothing, but they'll rather have they'll rather have a soiree in London or have an office in London and just. I had a conversation once with a political party. I won't say which one. You can probably guess, but it wasn't Labour, and it was interesting because I was going to go around the country giving talks about how bad Brexit was for each part of the country. One of the reasons why I now live in Durham is I came to Durham to give a talk about how bad Brexit was going to be for the North East at the university here, and and stayed. But I said to them, we'll go out, we'll do this tour, we'll talk about it, we'll go to the places that voted for Brexit, and we'll explain exactly what it's going to do to these places. And they were like, yeah, that's great. And but we've got no funding for this, we've got no budget for this. And I'm like, I'm not asking for much, but could you at least pay for my accommodation and my transport? No, we haven't got. And we were standing in an office, or sitting in an office, in central freaking London. An office in central London, right by Parliament Square. The rent on that place must have been £1 million a year. I don't know how much it costs to rent an office in central London opposite bloody Parliament. But I can imagine it's not £2.50 a week, And I'm sitting there going, you've got no money. And yet, it was just phenomenal. I was just like, okay. Priorities. Anyway, Labour should stop taking where they are for granted. Their bubble could soon burst. Audrey, I couldn't agree more. Audrey. That's how I feel. I feel like Labour, they take too much for granted. And it's all very well saying, yeah, but Graham, you're going to vote for Labour anyway. Yes, I am. But that doesn't mean that I can't be more useful to Labour as someone who's not just a passive voter who's like, I want to get rid of the Tories, X. No, I want to be an active supporter of the Labour Party and get out there and actually tell people, these are the reasons you should vote for Labour. But it does feel like they're just giving us one paddle. They haven't even given us a paddle. It's just like, can you give us a bit of help here to get your message out? No. We'll just write an article now and again for the Sunday Times or something, or even worse, the Express. Canal, 20 Singapore dollars. Thank you, Canal. You're wonderful. Boris reminds me of the verdict of Tom and Daisy in The Great Gatsby. Canal, absolutely 100% with you on this. I've used this quote many times in the past before. Tom and Daisy were careless people. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their, I think the quote is, vast wealth or whatever made them happy, and let other people clean up their mess. Trump and Johnson. That's perfect. quote there to end the show on. I'll be back at 1 o'clock for the agenda, where me and Phil are going to be wrapping up the week's events. And until then, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all of the wonderful people in the chat who have given wonderful super chats and also helped out with the actual discussion underway. Obviously, you are much a part of this show as I am, because obviously your comments are coming up here on the screen, and we try and do as much interaction as we can. But I'm going to let you go now. You can go and listen to James O'Brien have a rant over probably the same sort of stuff that I've been talking about. Who knows? Maybe he'll talk about e-scooters instead. You never know. But until next time, thanks for watching. Hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.